A lonely millionaire, suspicious of everyone around him, decides to test his brand new driver. He leaves a shiny black briefcase filled with stacks of cash in the back seat and secretly watches. The driver discovers it, his hands tremble, and for a moment, temptation burns in his eyes. But instead of running away with the money, he makes a shocking move, one that will not only stun the millionaire but change both of their lives forever. The city lights shimmered against the wet pavement as a sleek black Mercedes pulled up to the mansion's gates. Inside, an old man sat in silence. His face carried the weight of decades, sharp lines carved from wealth, betrayal, and too many sleepless nights. He was Victor Darnell, one of the richest men in the city, a self-made millionaire who trusted no one. Not his partners, not his family, and especially not his employees. Tonight, he was going to test his newest hire. In the front seat sat a young man in a crisp black suit, his posture rigid, hands tight around the steering wheel. His name was Daniel, 26 years old, and freshly employed as Victor's personal driver. To anyone else, it was the opportunity of a lifetime, working for a man whose fortune was spoken about in whispers. But for Daniel, it was survival. His mother's hospital bills were piling up. His younger sister needed tuition. And no matter how hard he worked, life seemed determined to break him. Victor studied Daniel quietly from the back seat, eyes narrowing, searching. Everyone wanted something. Everyone had a price. Tonight, Victor would discover Daniel. When the car rolled to a stop inside the marble driveway, Victor's wrinkled hands clutched a leather briefcase. He didn't say a word as he placed it gently on the seat beside him. The case looked ordinary, except for the way it gleamed under the dim light. Inside, stacked neatly, were bundles of $100 bills. $500,000 in cash. Enough to tempt even the purest soul. Victor's lips curled into a cold smile. He had left similar traps before, employees who found wallets stuffed with cash, secretaries who discovered envelopes of diamonds. None had resisted. They all failed, and each one was fired, erased from his world. But Daniel, Victor wasn't sure yet. Daniel, Victor's voice cut through the silence, gravelly commanding, "Take the car to the garage. I'll be in my study." "Yes, sir," Daniel answered, his tone polite but nervous. Victor climbed out of the car, leaning on his cane, and made his way up the steps. But as the massive doors closed behind him, he did not go to his study. Instead, he walked to a hidden room where monitors glowed, connected to tiny cameras he had installed inside the car. From here, he would watch every move Daniel made. The garage door shut, and Daniel exhaled heavily, alone now with the briefcase. His eyes flickered to the back seat, and the moment he noticed the case, his body stiffened. Slowly, carefully, he reached back and pulled it onto his lap. He hesitated, staring at it. His hands shook. For a moment, he simply sat there, breathing fast, as if deciding whether or not to open it. His reflection in the rearview mirror revealed the storm inside him. Temptation, fear, desperation. Finally, his fingers clicked open the locks. The lid lifted with a soft hiss. Stacks upon stacks of bills stared back at him, crisp and green, the scent of money filling the air. His throat tightened. His chest pounded. For someone like Daniel, who had counted coins to buy bread, who had watched his mother cry at night because she couldn't afford medicine, this wasn't just money. This was salvation. Victor leaned closer to the monitor, his cold eyes unblinking. This was the moment of truth. Daniel reached out, brushing the edges of the bills with trembling fingers. His lips parted as though whispering a silent prayer. And then he pulled his hand back. For nearly a full minute, he sat in silence, staring at the fortune that could change everything. Then slowly he closed the briefcase again. His breathing steadied. His face hardened with resolve. Victor raised a brow, intrigued. Few had made it this far, without stuffing their pockets. But Daniel wasn't done. Instead of hiding the case, Daniel lifted it gently, stepped out of the car, and walked across the garage. He found a small intercom near the door and pressed it. His voice was steady now, more certain than before. "Sir," he said into the speaker, You left something behind. I think you'll want it." Victor froze. His gnarled fingers tightened around his cane. On the monitor, Daniel stood there, holding the briefcase in both hands, waiting. No fear in his eyes. No greed either. Just honesty. But it wasn't over. Victor didn't answer the intercom. Instead, he pressed another button, one that activated a second camera hidden in the garage's far corner. He wanted to see what Daniel would do when ignored. Minutes ticked by. Daniel shifted on his feet, but didn't move. He didn't try to open the case again. He didn't attempt to hide it. He just stood there, waiting, patient, almost defiant. Victor's heart, hardened by years of betrayal, skipped a beat. Was this young man truly resisting? Or was it all an act? Finally, Victor whispered to himself, "Interesting." But just as he was about to step out and confront Daniel, something unexpected happened. A shadow moved in the garage. Daniel turned quickly, his grip tightening on the briefcase. From behind a pillar stepped another figure, a man dressed in dark clothes, his eyes sharp, his smile unsettling. Victor froze at the monitor, his breath catching. Who was this? Daniel's voice trembled for the first time. "Who are you?" "This is private property." The stranger smirked. "Relax, kid. I came for exactly what you're holding." His eyes darted to the briefcase. "Hand it over and no one gets hurt." Victor's blood ran cold. This wasn't part of the plan. The cameras hadn't caught this man entering. Somehow, he had slipped past the gates. Daniel stood tall, though fear rippled through him. His knuckles whitened around the handle of the case. "I don't know who you are," he said firmly, "but this doesn't belong to me, and I'm not giving it to you." The stranger's smile faded. Slowly, he reached into his jacket. A glint of steel caught the garage light. Victor's cane trembled in his grip as he whispered to himself, No, this wasn't supposed to happen." And in that moment, Victor realized the true test was no longer his. It was Daniel's fight for survival. The garage air thickened with silence, broken only by the faint hum of the car's cooling engine. Daniel's heartbeat thundered in his ears as the stranger stepped closer, the gleam of the knife dancing in the dim light. The briefcase felt heavier in his hands now, not because of the cash inside, but because of the dangerous eyes fixed upon it. "Put it down," the intruder said, his tone calm but edged with menace. "Walk away, and maybe you get to see tomorrow." Daniel swallowed hard. His instincts screamed to run, but his legs rooted to the ground. Something inside him, a stubborn flame that poverty had never managed to extinguish, refused to back down. He had promised himself long ago that he would never let fear dictate his choices. "This doesn't belong to me," Daniel said firmly, his voice stronger than he expected. "And I'm not handing it over to you either." The stranger tilted his head, amused by the defiance. "You're braver than you look," he muttered, circling slowly. But bravery doesn't stop blades. From the hidden room, Victor watched in disbelief, his knuckles white against his cane. He had orchestrated tests before, but this was something he hadn't planned. How did this man get inside? Was it coincidence? Or betrayal from someone within his staff? More importantly, what would Daniel do now? The camera feed showed Daniel tightening his grip on the briefcase, his eyes darting between the stranger and the exit. His chest rose and fell rapidly, but there was a clarity in his gaze, a steadiness that struck Victor like a lightning bolt. The intruder lunged. Daniel twisted to the side, narrowly avoiding the slash, the knife grazing his sleeve. The briefcase slipped for a moment, but he caught it before it hit the ground. Adrenaline surged through his veins, his mind racing. He could run. He could abandon the case and escape. But something in him, perhaps pride, perhaps loyalty, perhaps the thought of the man who had entrusted him with this job, anchored him to the ground. "This isn't yours," Daniel shouted, his voice echoing through the garage. The stranger growled, striking again, but Daniel raised the briefcase as a shield. The blade clanged against the metal locks, sparks flying. The impact jolted through his arms, but he held firm. Victor leaned closer to the monitors, breathless. He had expected greed, perhaps cowardice. But this this reckless courage, was something altogether different. Daniel's mind flashed images of his mother in the hospital bed, his sister studying by candlelight. He thought of everything he stood to lose if he failed this job. No, failure was not an option. With a sudden burst of strength, he shoved the briefcase forward, ramming it into the attacker's chest. The man staggered back, caught off guard. Daniel seized the moment, kicking the knife from his hand. It clattered across the concrete floor. "Enough!" Daniel roared, his voice filled with fire. The stranger stumbled, but then laughed, a low, sinister sound. "You've got fight, kid, but you don't understand what you're caught in." He spat blood on the ground and smirked. That money doesn't belong to him. It belongs to people far more dangerous. Victor's eyes widened at the words. Far more dangerous? His mind raced. Could this be connected to old rivals? To debts buried in his past? He clenched his jaw, suddenly aware that this night was spiraling into something darker than a mere test. The intruder backed toward the exit, glaring at Daniel. "You'll regret this. Both of you will." And with that, he darted into the shadows, disappearing as swiftly as he had arrived. Daniel stood frozen, chest heaving, the briefcase still clutched tightly in his hands. His shirt clung to his skin with sweat, his knuckles scraped from the struggle. The silence that followed was deafening. Slowly, he lifted the intercom again, pressing the button. "Sir," he said hoarsely, "I think you should come down here. Now." Moments later, the heavy door opened, and Victor stepped into the garage. His cane tapped sharply against the marble floor as he approached. Daniel straightened immediately, holding the briefcase out with both hands. "I found this in the back seat," Daniel said, his tone steady though his body trembled from exhaustion. "I thought it was yours. Then someone else tried to take it." Victor studied him silently, his cold eyes searching. There was no fear in Daniel's words, no hesitation in his gesture. Only honesty and something deeper, something Victor couldn't quite name. "You didn't take the money," Victor said quietly, his voice echoing in the vast garage. "No, sir." Daniel's answer was firm. "It isn't mine." "And you fought to protect it?" Daniel nodded. "Because it belonged to you." For the first time in years, Victor felt a crack in the icy armor around his heart. This young man, whom he had hired expecting betrayal, had risked his life to protect what wasn't even his. It wasn't loyalty bought by a paycheck. It wasn't fear of losing a job. It was something pure. Victor's gaze lingered on the bruises forming on Daniel's arms, the cut on his sleeve. He remembered the countless faces before who had failed, who had chosen greed the moment opportunity whispered. But Daniel had stood tall. Still, Victor's instincts whispered caution. Could it all be an act? Could Daniel somehow be working with the intruder, staging this scene to gain his trust? The doubt gnawed at him, but deeper than the doubt was something Victor hadn't felt in years: respect. He reached out, placing a weathered hand on the briefcase. Their eyes met, old and young, suspicion and determination colliding in silence. "You've surprised me tonight," Victor murmured. "Most men would have run with this by now." Daniel lowered his gaze, his voice humble. "My family needs me to be better than that, sir. Money doesn't fix everything, but doing the right thing, maybe it does." Victor's heart clenched at the words. He had spent decades believing money was the only power in this world. But here was this young man, bruised and breathless, reminding him of a truth he had long buried. Before he could respond, a sudden sound shattered the moment, the sharp ring of a phone from inside the briefcase. Daniel blinked, startled. "Did you put a phone in here?" Victor frowned. Slowly, he unlatched the case, pushing aside the stacks of cash. And there it was, a sleek black phone, vibrating with urgency, its screen flashing with an unknown number. Victor's blood ran cold. He hadn't placed it there. He exchanged a glance with Daniel, the unspoken dread clear in both their eyes. Whoever had just called knew exactly where that money was. And Victor realized, for the first time that night, that the real test had only just begun. The phone inside the briefcase vibrated again, louder this time, its shrill tone cutting through the thick silence of the garage. Daniel and Victor both stared at it as if it were a live grenade. The stacks of cash around it suddenly felt meaningless compared to the mystery of who was calling. Victor's weathered fingers hovered over the device. His instinct screamed caution. He had enemies, rivals, people who would love to see him destroyed. For years, he had believed money was his armor, but in this moment, it felt more like bait. "Don't," Daniel whispered, his voice urgent. "What if it's a trap?" Victor hesitated. His eyes flickered toward Daniel, studying the young man again. Even now, after everything, Daniel wasn't thinking of the money. He was thinking of safety, of loyalty. That realization struck Victor harder than the ringing itself. Still, he couldn't ignore it. Slowly, he pressed the answer button and lifted the phone to his ear. The line crackled. Then a voice, low, distorted, chilling. "Mr. Darnell," it said, smooth yet threatening. "I see you've found my gift." Victor's grip tightened. "Who is this?" he demanded. A dry chuckle came from the other end. "That briefcase doesn't belong to you anymore. You kept what was never yours for far too long. Consider this your warning. Return it, or watch everything you value crumble." Victor's heart slammed against his chest. This wasn't random. This was personal. Daniel stepped closer, frowning. He could hear fragments of the voice, the venom behind every word. "Sir, who is it?" Victor raised a hand, silencing him. "What do you want from me?" "What I'm owed," the voice hissed. "And you know exactly what that means. Tomorrow night, midnight, the old docks. Bring the case alone. If you don't, your empire burns." The line went dead. Victor stood frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear long after the call ended. His pulse roared in his ears, his mind spinning back through decades of ruthless deals, broken promises, and men he had crushed on his rise to power. Any one of them could have come back to collect. But which? Daniel stepped forward cautiously. "Sir, what's happening?" "Who was that?" Victor lowered the phone slowly, his face unreadable. For the first time in years, he looked vulnerable, like the fortress of wealth he had built around himself had cracked. "That voice," Victor muttered, more to himself than Daniel. "It sounded like someone I buried years ago." Daniel's eyes widened. "Buried?" Victor ignored the question, snapping the briefcase shut with trembling hands. "This has gone beyond a test. Whoever this is, they know too much. And if they know where this case is, they know everything else too." For the first time that night, Daniel saw not the cold millionaire everyone whispered about, but a man haunted by ghosts. A man who realized money couldn't shield him from the past. "Then let me help," Daniel said firmly. Victor looked at him, startled. "Help? You've already risked your life tonight. Why stay?" "Because walking away won't change what's coming for you," Daniel replied. "And if you're in danger, that means I am too. Besides," he glanced at the briefcase. "If they're right, if this money isn't really yours, then maybe fighting for it means more than just protecting your fortune. Maybe it's about something bigger." Victor stared at him in silence, his heart torn between suspicion and respect. He had set out to test Daniel's loyalty, but somehow, the test had turned inward. Wasn't it his own soul being measured now? The old man let out a heavy breath. "You're either incredibly foolish, Daniel, or the bravest man I've met." A grim smile touched Daniel's lips. "Maybe both." The following day passed in uneasy silence. Victor remained locked in his study, making calls, digging into old records, searching for clues about who could be behind the threat. Daniel stayed close, alert, as though expecting the intruder to return at any moment. Every sound, every shadow seemed like a warning. By nightfall, the weight of the coming meeting pressed down on them both. When the clock struck 11, Victor entered the garage again, the briefcase in hand. Daniel was already there, waiting by the car. "You shouldn't come," Victor said, his tone low. "This is my past. My mistake. My war." Daniel shook his head. "And yet I'm still your driver. You hired me to take you places, didn't you? Well, tonight, I'm taking you through this." For the first time in decades, Victor almost smiled. Not the cold smirk of a tycoon, but a genuine, fragile smile. "Very well," he said softly. Let's go. The Mercedes cut through the night like a phantom, its headlights slicing the fog that gathered along the city's edge. The docks loomed ahead, abandoned warehouses towering like silent sentinels. They parked. The air was heavy with salt and rust, the creak of metal echoing in the darkness. Victor stepped out slowly, leaning on his cane, the briefcase swinging at his side. Daniel followed closely, his eyes scanning every shadow. Then they appeared. A group of men stepped from the darkness, their faces hidden, their movements precise. At the center of them all was a tall figure in a black coat. His voice, when he spoke, carried the same venom as the phone call. "Victor Darnell," he drawled. "The man who thought he could take everything and never pay the price." Victor's jaw clenched. "Who are you?" The figure stepped closer, removing his hood. The lamplight revealed a scarred face, one Victor recognized instantly. His breath caught. "Marcus," he whispered. Daniel glanced between them, confused. "You know him?" Victor's voice shook. "I thought he was dead." Marcus smirked. "You tried to make me dead, but you can't kill a man who's already lost everything. You ruined me, Victor, and tonight I collect." He motioned to the briefcase. "The money. Now." Victor gripped the handle tighter, his mind torn. Handing it over might buy him time, but men like Marcus never stopped at money. They wanted blood. Before Victor could speak, Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady. "If this is between you two, then take it up with him. But don't drag me into your war." Marcus's cold eyes studied Daniel, then flicked to the briefcase. "And who's this? The loyal servant? Tell me, boy, do you think he'd protect you when the knives come out?" Daniel didn't flinch. "I already did once." For a moment, silence reigned. Then Marcus laughed darkly. "You've got spirit, I'll give you that. But spirit doesn't stop bullets." His men shifted, weapons glinting under the lamplight. Victor's mind raced. He had always believed loyalty was an illusion, that everyone had a price. But as he looked at Daniel standing there, unarmed yet unshaken, he felt something stir in him. Something he hadn't felt in years. The will to fight not for wealth, but for trust. With trembling resolve, Victor handed the briefcase to Daniel. "If anyone's going to decide what happens to this money," he said hoarsely, "it's the only man tonight who's proven he deserves it." Marcus's eyes widened in fury. His men raised their weapons. And Daniel, holding $500,000 and the weight of two men's legacies, realized his next move would decide not just his fate, but Victor's, and perhaps the very meaning of loyalty itself.